She walked in quietly, almost unnoticed. Her steps were small, her clothes plain, and there was nothing about her that screamed sharpshooter. No fancy gear, no confident swagger. Just a simple woman, holding an old, scratched-up rifle, like it had been sitting in a dusty attic for years. The shooting range was already buzzing. People were lined up, most in polished gear, some in military-style boots, wearing noise-canceling headphones and gloves that looked more expensive than her entire outfit. Conversations paused when she entered, not because they recognized her, but because they didn't. She didn't fit. One man smirked. Another nudged his friend, whispering something with a grin. Someone chuckled loud enough to be heard. She didn't flinch. Her eyes didn't even wander to them. Instead, she walked slowly to the far end of the line, where an unused booth stood. She set her rifle down gently, almost like it was something sacred. Then she sat. No one offered help. No one said a word. But the glances continued, and so did the quiet laughs. To them, she was a joke. A woman who probably wandered into the wrong place. Or worse, someone tried to impress the wrong crowd. The shooting range wasn't known for patience or kindness. It was a place of skill, focus, and competition. Everyone came to prove something. And what did she look like she came to prove? Nothing. She didn't pull out scopes or special ammo. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even look around to see who was watching. She just cleaned the barrel slowly with a cloth from her coat pocket, as if the whole world outside her booth didn't exist. People talked louder now, pretending not to watch her, but they were watching. One man leaned on the partition between booths, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You here for fun, miss? This ain't no carnival game." She gave no response, just a small breath. Then she adjusted her stance. Nothing dramatic, nothing practiced, just steady. The man scoffed and walked away. On the firing line, targets were already set. Each shooter had their own goal, some going for tight groupings, others pushing for distance. But her target was the one at the far edge, the one that barely anyone used. Some said it was out of alignment. Some said it wasn't worth the effort. But that's the one she chose. Another shot rang out nearby. A clean hit. Applause. The shooters around her were busy showing off, comparing hits, reviewing their spreads on digital monitors. And there she was, still silent, still focused. Her hands moved with care. Her fingers wrapped around the trigger like it was something fragile. More whispers followed. Maybe she's never even fired a gun. She's going to miss the paper completely. She's probably here to impress her boyfriend. Still, she said nothing. Not a word. Just one quiet breath after another. Then, slowly, she lifted the rifle. It looked heavy in her hands, not because she was weak, but because she carried it with meaning, like each movement mattered. Her finger rested on the trigger, her eye behind the sight. Everything around her began to quiet down. The background noise, the snickers, even the constant sound of bullets hitting cardboard and wood. All seemed to fade just a little. People noticed. Even if they didn't want to admit it, they felt something shift. A man across from her paused mid-reload. Another shooter stopped adjusting his scope. They didn't know why they were suddenly paying attention, but they were, because something about her silence felt different. She hadn't shot yet, but somehow she had already changed the air in the room. The laughter had stopped. The side comments had faded. Now it was just her, that old rifle, and a long, empty stretch of range in front of her. And she hadn't even fired a single round. Not yet. The range wasn't just a place for shooting. It was a stage. Every sound, the crack of a bullet, the clink of a shell casing, was part of a show. And most people came to be seen. Loud voices, flashy moves, expensive gear. It was more than sport. It was ego. That's why her presence stood out like a quiet note in a noisy song. Nobody knew her name. She wasn't on the regular list. No badges, no medals on her bag. Just a face that looked out of place and eyes that didn't seem interested in anyone around her. People judged quickly. They always did. To them, she looked lost. She looked like she needed help. She looked like she didn't belong. There was a man 3 booths down, ex-military, always bragged about his time overseas. Today, He was showing off to a couple of newcomers, loudly explaining wind speed, grip pressure, stance angles. Details most people only half understood. He noticed her, of course. Everyone did, but he didn't look impressed. He just smirked and shook his head. "I give her 5 shots," he told the newcomers. "Then she's packing up." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because they assumed he was right. But she didn't hear them, or maybe she just didn't care. Her hands were still, her eyes fixed. She moved with care, not hesitation. There was no rush, no panic, just purpose. Then came the sound of another shot, not from her, but from the guy beside her. It was loud and sharp. The bullet hit dead center. He pulled back with a proud grin and looked over at her, waiting for a reaction. She didn't give him one. He frowned, then leaned over slightly. "You gonna shoot that thing or just stare at it all day?" She blinked once, then adjusted the scope. Not a word. He shrugged and turned back to his station, muttering something under his breath. Something about beginners wasting space. That's when the range officer started walking over. Not in a hurry, but clearly curious. He'd seen enough rookies freeze up or back out. Maybe he thought she was nervous. Maybe he was about to gently suggest she'd try again another time. But when he reached her booth, he didn't say anything. He just watched. Because now she was moving. Not quickly, not dramatically, just with calm. She set her elbow just right, tucked her shoulder in, took one long, steady breath. The officer stayed a few more seconds, then quietly stepped back. He didn't need to say anything. He could feel what the others were starting to feel too. Something was different. The chatter at the far end was quieter now. The smirks were still there, but they were starting to fade. People were watching, but they weren't sure why. She hadn't done anything yet. She hadn't fired even once. Still, the doubt was shifting. It wasn't gone, but it was uncertain. The woman in the simple coat, with the old rifle, wasn't acting like someone who didn't know what she was doing. She wasn't fumbling. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was. And that unsettled them more than any missed shot ever could. Because doubt loves noise. But she gave them silence. The guy from earlier, the one who gave her 5 shots, glanced her way again. His voice was lower now. "She's probably aiming too far out. That target's warped anyway. Waste of time." But he didn't sound sure anymore. The woman exhaled again, her breathing controlled, almost meditative. Her finger brushed the trigger. Not pulling yet, just feeling it. People kept watching. Even if they didn't say it out loud, their eyes said it for them. Who was she? Why was she so still? Why did it feel like she wasn't trying to hit the target, but waiting for the right moment to become it? Nobody had answers. But now, everyone was paying attention. Her hand didn't shake. Not even a little. She held that old rifle like it was part of her, like it belonged to her in a way that no one else could understand. The wood was worn, the metal dull from years of use, but her grip told a different story. It said this rifle had been through something. And so had she. No one could say how long she stood there, steady and silent. Time seemed to stretch. Around her, the usual rhythm of the range continued. Shots fired. Target struck. Shells falling to the ground with soft metallic clinks. But there was something about her presence that bent the flow, like everything else was just noise, and she was the only still point in the room. She lifted the rifle slightly, aligning the sight with a spot far down the range. Not the regular bullseye target like the others were aiming at. She was looking farther, much farther, toward a shadowed corner that no one ever used. It wasn't marked. It wasn't even well lit. Some thought it was just a maintenance wall, not meant for shooting. No one ever tried. No one ever cared. But that's where she looked. The people nearby followed her gaze. One man squinted. Another raised his brow. "What's she aiming at?" Someone asked quietly. There was no answer, just silence. The range officer stepped a little closer again, not interrupting, just watching. His expression had changed. No more polite concern. Now it was curiosity, maybe even a bit of respect. She made one last adjustment, so subtle it was barely noticeable. Then her fingers settled on the trigger. No hesitation. No pause. Just a slow, smooth motion. The sound of the shot cracked across the range. Not louder than any other shot, but sharper, somehow more complete, like the air had been waiting for it. Then silence. People leaned forward. The monitors didn't blink. No hit on the standard targets. Nothing on the screens. Someone laughed nervously. Guess that one went off the board. But nobody joined in, because a second later, a faint ping echoed from deep down the range. Not from the targets. Not from the safety wall. It was a sound no one recognized at first. Metal striking metal, but from a place beyond where most even aimed. The officer walked slowly down the line, past the usual targets. His steps were measured, eyes scanning every corner. Everyone watched him, their heads turning in unison like a slow wave. He stopped at the far end, near the wall no one used. He looked up, squinting. Then he raised one hand. There was something above the normal line of sight. A small, rusted bell, half hidden behind a cracked support beam, almost invisible from where the booth stood. It wasn't part of the range anymore, just a leftover from some old setup long forgotten. It swung gently. The woman had hit it, dead center. Now the room was truly quiet, not just silent, but still. Every shooter had stopped, even the ones who had laughed the loudest, even the ones with all the gear, all the talk, all the pride, because none of them had ever noticed that target. None of them had ever hit it. Some had never even seen it, but she had. And with one shot, she'd done what nobody else had even thought to try. Not with high-tech scopes, not with custom barrels, not with bragging or bravado, just with calm hands, quiet focus, and an old rifle that everyone had dismissed before she ever fired it. The officer returned slowly. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once as he passed by her booth. That was all. She didn't smile, didn't raise her arms or look around for praise. She simply pulled the bolt back, let the shell drop, and began cleaning her rifle again. No rush, no words. The only sound was the soft brushing of cloth on metal. She wiped down the rifle like it was routine, like what she had just done wasn't extraordinary, like it was just another shot on just another day. But the silence around her said otherwise. No one was speaking now. No one was laughing. The usual rhythm of conversation, bragging, and commentary had stopped completely. People who usually couldn't wait to compare targets or share shooting tips stood still, eyes fixed on her. They weren't sure what to say, weren't sure if they should say anything. Even the man who had mocked her earlier, the one who called out jokes loud enough for her to hear, stood frozen. His arms were crossed, but not in confidence anymore, more like defense. Like something about that one perfect shot had struck him too, and she still hadn't said a word. One of the younger shooters slowly walked toward the far wall, the same one where the bell had been hit. He tilted his head and stared upward. From down the range, his voice carried across the quiet. "It's real." She hit the bell. That was all it took to stir the rest. The others began stepping out from their booths, trying to get a better look. Heads tilted, necks craned. Some hadn't even noticed the bell existed. It blended into background, coated in rust and dust, almost camouflaged in the shadows above the beam. But now it was impossible to ignore, because now it mattered. Still, she kept cleaning the rifle, her hands steady and slow. The soft sweep of cloth over metal seemed louder than it should have been. It cut through the quiet like a metronome, keeping time while everyone else stood still. One man finally broke the silence. How did she even see that thing? Nobody answered. Another asked, "Has anyone ever hit before?" Again, silence. The officer leaned against the counter behind her booth now. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, just watched her in the same way you might watch someone play an instrument for the 100th time. Only now, finally realizing how good they really were. The man from earlier, the one with the military stories and loud voice, shifted uncomfortably in his booth. He picked up his rifle, stared down the range, then slowly set it back down. He hadn't fired a shot since she did. He looked at her and said, almost under his breath, "I didn't even know there was a bell up there." She looked up at him, just for a second, not with judgment, not with pride, just calm recognition. Then she nodded once. It wasn't smug. It wasn't condescending. It was something simpler, like she was acknowledging not just him, but the moment, like she had expected the silence to come, like it wasn't surprising to her at all. Then she stood. Her movements were still unhurried. She gathered her things carefully, sliding the old rifle back into its case. There were no stickers or patches on it, no markings or logos. It was just a plain black case, the kind you'd expect to find at a pawn shop, not on a professional shooter's bench. But everyone's eyes followed it now. That case, those hands, that quiet walk, they all told a story. One shot had rewritten the room. One moment had redrawn the lines between beginner and master, between show and skill. The crowd began shifting, not away from her, but toward her. A few people stepped aside to make room. Some even nodded as she passed, the way people nod to someone who's earned their respect. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she just didn't need to. At the edge of the room, the officer finally spoke. "Not many people ever see that bell," he said quietly. "Even fewer try to hit it." She paused, one hand on the door. Then, for the first time all day, she spoke. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. Just that." Then she walked out, and behind her, the door clicked shut, leaving a room full of people who would never look at that range the same way again. The door closed behind her with the softest sound, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. Inside, no one moved for several seconds. The room was still caught in the weight of what had just happened. That one shot, that one silent statement, hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. And then, slowly, things began to shift. Not back to normal because something had changed, but forward into something new. The people who had scoffed or joked weren't laughing anymore. Some looked at the ground. Some stood with their arms folded, not out of confidence now, but out of reflection. And others just kept staring at that distant wall, where the forgotten bell had swung gently not long ago. Nobody had thought it could be done. Not with that rifle. Not by someone like her. But that was the point, wasn't it? They had all walked in that morning thinking they knew what skill looked like, what it sounded like, what kind of gear it wore, how it talked, how it carried itself. And then she walked in, quiet, unnoticed, and uninterested in approval, and shattered all of it with one calm breath and one perfect shot. One man walked down the range, still trying to understand. He stopped under the beam where the bell was hit, squinting to trace the path of the bullet. His friend joined him. "Do you think she practiced that?" one of them asked. "I don't think she needed to," the other said. The officer was now back at the counter, jotting something in a small notebook. Not a report, just a record. He paused for a moment, tapping his pen against the page, then looked up and glanced toward the empty booth she had left behind. "I've worked here 12 years, he said out loud, more to himself than anyone. Never saw anyone even try. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the rest. She didn't just hit the target. She saw it. And that might have been the most unsettling part for everyone watching, because it meant it had been there all along, in plain sight, but somehow invisible, until someone with quiet eyes and quiet hands walked in and reminded them all what real focus looked like. The loud guy from earlier sat down heavily at his bench. His fingers hovered over his own rifle. You could see the thoughts in his eyes. Not shame exactly, but realization that maybe, somewhere along the line, he'd started shooting for attention, for applause, for noise. But she hadn't. She hadn't come to win anything, or to prove a point. She didn't argue when they mocked her. She didn't respond when they questioned her. She didn't boast when she succeeded. She just came to shoot, and she left having done it better than anyone else that day. One of the younger shooters, the same one who walked the far end to confirm the bell, stood by the exit now. He stared at the door she had walked through, like he was hoping she might come back, like maybe he had more to ask. But he didn't move, just stood still, lost in thought. She didn't even look proud, someone said behind him. "No," the young shooter replied. She didn't have to, because the shot spoke louder than any expression ever could. At the front desk, a name was still on the check-in sheet. A simple, handwritten signature. No first name, just M. Graves. Nobody had ever seen it before, and now they'd never forget it. Her booth remained empty the rest of the day. No one wanted to take it. It didn't feel right. It was like the space still held something. Not just the echo of the shot, but the quiet, steady presence of someone who reminded them all what real skill looks like. Not loud, not flashy, not announced. Just a woman with an old rifle who saw what no one else even thought to look for and hit it. The booth stayed untouched the next 3 days. Not because it was broken, not because there was a rule. It just felt wrong, like something sacred had happened there, and stepping into it too soon might break the spell. Even the regulars, the ones who never miss a day, avoided it. They kept to the sides, pretending it didn't matter, but their eyes kept drifting back. That one booth, that one shot, that quiet woman. People started talking, but not in the usual way. No one shouted. No one claimed they knew her. It was all hushed, half whispers, pieces of stories stitched together by guesswork and curiosity. Some said she used to compete professionally. Others thought she was military. A few swore she had once taught special forces. But no one knew for sure. All they had was that moment, that calm breath, that impossible shot, and her name, scribbled in simple print, M. Graves. No one even knew her first name. But still, the story spread, not just through the range, but beyond it, into online forums, local message boards, even among shooting instructors who had never met her. They all wanted to know the same thing. Who was the woman who hit the invisible bell? By the end of the week, a small group gathered near her booth each morning. They didn't say it out loud, but they were waiting, hoping, wondering if she'd return. She never did, but the range had changed. More people started aiming beyond the regular targets, not for bragging rights, but for curiosity. They wanted to see if they could spot the bell. Some used scopes, some used spotters, some even brought ladders to look from different angles. But few could see it clearly, and none came close to hitting it. Still, they tried, because now they knew it was possible. The officer, the one who watched her so closely that day, quietly adjusted the lighting above the far wall. Just a little. He didn't say why. But after that, the bell glinted faintly in the right light, just enough to catch the eye if you were really looking. One shooter, young, impatient, all energy and confidence, managed to spot the bell after an hour of scanning. He took a deep breath, settled his aim, and fired. The bullet missed by several inches. He lowered the rifle, shaking his head. She made it look easy, and that's what got at people the most. She hadn't just done something difficult. She'd done it without effort. No show, no prep talk, no praise-seeking. Just action, precision, silence. It made people question themselves. Some started training more, staying longer, reading manuals and studying techniques they'd once ignored. Others changed how they spoke at the range, less boasting, more listening. Even the loud guy, the one who had mocked her before, started showing up earlier than usual. Not to talk, just to shoot. He brought a notebook with him now, jotting things down between rounds. People noticed, but no one mentioned it, because they all understood. She hadn't come to win. She came to remind them of something they'd all forgotten. That skill isn't loud. It isn't covered in patches and pins. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It just is. And now, everyone who stood in that range that day carried a piece of her with them. Not her name, not her voice. But the moment they realized what quiet power really looked like, that moment had changed the room. And it was changing them too. Because once you've seen someone hit the target no one else could see, you stop aiming where everyone else is aiming. You start looking for your own bell. A few months had passed, and still, no one had seen her again. The name M. Graves became more than a signature. It became a legend. People still talked about that day like it had just happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly, like sharing a secret. You'd hear in the way they spoke between shots, in the careful way they checked their rifles, in the silence that settled when someone tried for the bell. But no one hit it. Not once. And they were starting to accept that maybe, just maybe, that shot wasn't meant to be repeated. Maybe it was a one-time thing. a moment that belonged to her, and only her, until one morning, everything shifted again. It was early. The range had just opened. Only a few regulars had shown up. The air still smelled faintly of oil and gunpowder. That familiar hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. And then, just like before, the door opened. No one turned right away. People were used to new shooters coming in. But then someone glanced up and froze. It was her. Same simple jacket. Same old case. Same calm steps. She walked to the booth, asterisk booth, and set the case down gently. Not a word. Just like last time. The officer looked up from the counter and stared. You could see the surprise flicker across his face, but he didn't speak. Just gave a single slow nod. Someone whispered, "Is that her?" Another said, "It's got to be." Within minutes, the quiet spread. Shooters paused mid-round. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even those who had never seen her before felt it. The tension, the anticipation. Like something rare was happening again. She opened a case. Same rifle. Same worn wood. Same aged metal. And still, her hands were steady. She didn't look around. Didn't acknowledge the dozen eyes now watching from behind safety glass and booths. Her focus was complete. It wrapped around her like a shield, blocking out everything else. She loaded one round. No warm-up shots. No sight adjustments. No fuss. Then she paused. Her gaze shifted, not to the bell this time, but slightly lower. Somewhere else. A spot no one had ever looked before. A strange part of the wall that looked like nothing. Just metal. Flat, plain, dusty. She raised her rifle slowly. People leaned in. She adjusted her aim just a little. You could see her breathing deep and steady, chest rising slowly. Then came the shot. It rang through the room, sharp and clean. People flinched, not from the sound, but from the anticipation. There was no immediate reaction. No ping. No clang. Just silence. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then, somewhere behind that same wall, something dropped. It wasn't loud. More like a soft mechanical clatter. But the range officer's eyes widened. He looked straight at the spot she had aimed for and took a step forward. "What was that?" someone asked. The officer didn't answer. He just walked forward, careful, cautious. He reached the far end, bent down, and picked something up. He turned it over in his hand. It was a tiny latch, painted the same dull gray as the wall behind it. And behind where it had been, a small panel was now open, a hidden compartment, slightly recessed into the structure. He opened it. Inside was an old, forgotten maintenance target, a thick metal plate, not hooked up to the digital system. No tracking, no sensors, just a small paper bullseye, yellow from age, and right through the center, a clean hole, dead center. Someone whispered. She found another one. The room stayed quiet. The officer walked back, holding the target in one hand. His expression said everything. He didn't understand how she'd known it was there. No one did. She had seen something no one else even knew existed. Again, she packed up her rifle without a word. This time, as she turned to leave, someone near the door stepped aside quickly, holding it open for her. She nodded once, the same quiet grace. Then she was gone, again, and the story, already powerful, grew even deeper. It wasn't just about the bell anymore. It wasn't about a single shot. It was about how she saw the invisible, found the hidden, hit what no one else even imagined was there. Now, the range had 2 mysteries, 2 impossible targets, and one woman who could find them both.